I got the message late at night, just as I was about to fall asleep. It came through my email, a bland subject line that could have been spam if not for the sender's name. From Lila. My chest tightened. I hadn't heard that name in years. The email was short, almost cryptic. Hey, it's been a long time. I found something you need to see. Please come by the house. Tomorrow night, 8 p.m. She didn't include an address. She didn't need to. Her family's house was burned into my memory. I had spent more time there than my own home as a kid, back when my parents were always fighting and Lila was my escape. I read the email again, unsure if it was real or a cruel joke. By morning, it still sat in my inbox, daring me to answer. Curiosity clawed at me, but guilt gnawed harder. It had been years since I'd spoken to Lila. She drifted away from everyone after high school, retreating into a private world none of us could enter. I'd tried to reach out a few times, but the silence from her end wore me down. And now this. The drive to her house was longer than I remembered. The neighborhoods I passed had changed, new buildings where old ones used to be, but the road to her house hadn't. It was long, winding, and choked by overgrown woods that swallowed what little sunlight filtered through the gray sky. Twice I thought about turning back, telling myself I was being stupid, but I kept driving, guilt growing heavier with every mile. When I pulled into the driveway, the house loomed ahead, warped and wrong. The white paint had yellowed and peeled in curling strips. The windows were cloudy, reflecting fractured light. Vines clung to the walls, gripping the sagging roof. The door was wide open. I stepped out of the car, gravel crunching louder than I expected. The air carried the sharp tang of damp and decay. For a moment I stood there staring, my stomach twisting with something I couldn't name. Jack? Her voice was quiet, but there was no mistaking it. "It's me," she called again. "Come in." My legs felt like lead, but I forced myself forward. The inside was worse than the outside, dark, cluttered, and suffocating. The thick air carried a sour, unfamiliar smell. And then I saw her. She stood in the hallway, dim light from the kitchen, casting her in shadows. At first she looked the same. Her face still had that youthful roundness I remembered, her dark brown hair loose around her shoulders. But as she stepped closer, something was wrong. Her eyes were wide, unnervingly bright. Her smile stretched taut, unnatural. "Lila," I managed, my throat dry. She beamed, a smile I hadn't seen in over a decade. "It's been too long, Jack." I nodded, unsure what to say, my gaze darting around the house. It felt smaller than I remembered. Walls pressing closer, ceiling lower. The peeling wallpaper revealed splintered wood beneath. "I'm so glad you came," she said, stepping closer. "I was worried you wouldn't." "I almost didn't," I admitted. "I wasn't sure if it was really you." Her smile faltered just for a moment before snapping back into place. "Of course it's me. Who else would it be?" Her hand brushed my arm, light but icy. The contact lingered too long, setting my nerves on edge. "Come on," she said, turning toward the kitchen. "We have a lot to talk about." I followed her, unease thickening with each step. The kitchen was almost as I remembered it. The old oak table where we used to play cards was still there, but the surface was warped and darkened. The faded curtains barely clung to their rusty rods. The air carried a hint of mildew mixed with something sharper, metallic like iron. Lila gestured for me to sit, her movements jerky, almost mechanical. I pulled out a chair, its legs scraping against the cracked linoleum, and sat. She leaned against the counter, arms crossed tightly over her chest. "Do you ever think about the old days?" she asked, her voice soft, wistful. "All the time," I said, forcing a weak smile. "We had some good times back then." Her eyes flickered to mine, then away, searching my face for something. "I've been thinking about it a lot lately. About us. About how things used to be." I nodded, unsure what to say. Her words carried a weight, unspoken and heavy, but just out of reach. "I want to show you something," she said suddenly, her voice sharp, urgent. "What is it?" "Something from when we were kids. It's in the basement." My stomach tightened. The basement. I hadn't been down there since we were kids. It was always her favorite place to play, though I never understood why. Even back then it felt wrong. Too dark, too cold, with an earthy smell that clung to your skin. "I don't know, Lila," I said, trying to sound casual. "It's been a long day and—" "Please." She stepped closer, her eyes locking onto mine. "It's important. You'll understand when you see it." Her voice trembled, fragile and desperate. Against my better judgment, I nodded. "Okay." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Follow me." The basement door creaked as she pulled it open, revealing a narrow staircase swallowed by darkness. A damp, earthy smell wafted up, sharper and more acrid than I remembered. She flipped a switch, and a single bare bulb at the bottom flickered to life, casting warped shadows along the walls. I hesitated at the top, gripping the banister. Lila was already descending, her steps quick and eager, like she couldn't wait to get there. "Come on, Jack," she called, not looking back. I forced myself to move, each step groaning underfoot. The air grew colder as I descended, the shadows shifting with each movement. When I reached the bottom, I froze. The basement was wrong. It wasn't just the darkness or the cold. Everything felt wrong, like someone had moved it around with no idea where it belonged. Rusted tools dangled crookedly from the walls, their edges sharp and uneven. The floor was a mess of boxes, jars, and scraps of metal that caught the dim light in unsettling flashes. But it was the jars that held my attention. They lined the shelves, their glass cloudy with age, contents murky and indistinct. Some held liquid, thick, dark, and viscous, while others contained things. Pale, misshapen objects floated lifelessly inside, their shapes impossible to identify. What is all this?" I whispered. Lila didn't answer immediately. She moved to a table at the room's center, where something lay hidden under a cloth. Her hands shook slightly as she set them on it. "These are my memories," she said softly, reverently. "Everything that matters, everything we made together." I stared, the words refusing to sink in. "Lila, this is—" "Look." She pulled the cloth away. It was a doll. At least I thought it was. Stitched from scraps of fabric, its shape was lumpy and uneven. Its face, painted on, had crooked, smeared features. But as I stepped closer, I saw it wasn't just fabric. The stuffing was wrong. Patches of fur poked through the seams, matted and stained. Small bones jutted out at odd angles, their surfaces yellowed with age. The sharp, rancid smell hit me, and I recoiled. "What the hell is this?" I demanded, my voice rising. "It's ours," Lila said, her voice soft, dreamy. "We made it together, don't you remember?" "No," I said, shaking my head. "I don't remember this. I couldn't have—" "You did," she insisted, her tone firm. "You just forgot. But it's okay. I kept it safe. For you. For us." She picked up the doll, cradling it like a child. Her smile stretched too wide, her eyes gleaming with something I couldn't name. "You'll understand soon," she whispered. "You'll see." I stumbled back, a tight, uneasy pressure building in my chest. The doll, its patches of fur and exposed bones, radiated a wrongness I couldn't explain. It felt alive, watching me. "Lila, this isn't funny," I said, my voice unsteady. "What is all this? What are you talking about?" Her gaze stayed fixed on the doll, her fingers tracing its patchwork surface with unsettling tenderness. When she finally looked at me, her eyes shimmered with something like pride or obsession. "This doll," she said softly, "is us. It's everything we were, everything we are. Don't you remember how we made it together? How we filled it with our promises?" "I didn't make that thing," I said, shaking my head. "I don't even know what it is." Her face crumpled, lips trembling like I'd struck her. "You did. You just don't want to remember." "Lila, this is insane." She clutched the doll tighter and took a step toward me. Her voice sank to a quiet, chilling murmur. "It wasn't supposed to be like this. You were supposed to come back. We were supposed to finish what we started." "Finish what?" My voice cracked. "What the hell are you talking about?" She stopped a few feet away, her head tilting to the side. Her smile returned, stretched too tight, her teeth glinting in the dim light. "The bond, Jack. Our bond. It was supposed to be forever, don't you see? This doll. It's the key. It's how we stay together. Always." My stomach churned. "Stay together? What does that even mean?" "It means I've been keeping you safe," she said, her tone soft but eerily matter-of-fact. "All these years, I've been protecting you. You have no idea how much I've done for you." I stepped back, my hand brushing against the edge of the table. "Protecting me from what?" Her eyes darkened, her expression turning serious. "From everything. The things that would hurt you. The things that would take you away from me." The air seemed heavier with every word she spoke. "Lila, you're scaring me." "Good," she said sharply. "You should be scared. Because if we don't finish the ritual, I can't protect you anymore." I froze. "Ritual?" She cradled the doll tighter. "It started when we were kids. Don't you remember? You promised we'd always be together. You swore on it. And I made sure it would happen." Fragments of memories surface. Her dragging me to the basement that summer, the whispered chants, the way she'd pressed my hand to the doll. "You said it was a game," I whispered. "It was," she said with a sad smile. "To you, but not to me." "What did you do, Lila?" My voice shook. She hesitated, her gaze dropping to the doll. "I made sure you'd be safe, that nothing could take you from me, but now it's breaking. The bond is breaking, and if we don't fix it, everything will fall apart." I shook my head, a restless energy coursing through me. "You're not making sense. What bond? What are you talking about?" Her eyes snapped back to mine, wild and desperate. "The bond that keeps us together, Jack. That keeps you safe. Without it, I'll lose you. And you'll lose everything." Her words hit like a punch to the gut. Memories rushed in, times I couldn't explain. The stranger who pulled me from drowning, the near-car accident I walked away from unscathed, the illnesses that seemed to vanish overnight. "Lila," my voice faltered. She stepped closer, her expression softening. "You don't have to be afraid, Jack. We can fix this. But you have to help me. You have to finish the ritual." The doll in her hand seemed to throb, its seam shifting subtly in the dim light. "Lila, this has to stop. Whatever this is, it's not right." Her smile faltered. For a moment I thought I saw sadness in her eyes, but it vanished, replaced by a hard, determined glare. "You don't understand," she said, her voice wavering. "You never understood. I did this for you." She clutched the doll tighter, the room growing colder as shadows stretched unnaturally along the walls. "Lila," I said, keeping my voice steady, "put the doll down. Let's talk about this." But she didn't move. Her voice warped, low, gravelly, tangled with overlapping whispers, in a language that didn't belong to this world. The words crawled under my skin, setting my nerves on edge. "What are you doing?" I demanded, stepping back. "I'm fixing it," she said, her voice distorted. "I'm making sure nothing can take you away from me." Her body convulsed, shoulders jerking violently. Her free hand clawed at her chest, ripping her shirt to reveal pale, translucent skin beneath. "Lila!" I shouted, panic rising. She collapsed to her knees, the doll tumbling from her hands and landing with a sickening squelch. For a moment she stayed there, gasping, head bowed. Then slowly she looked up at me. Her face was changing. Her skin rippled, the contours of her features shifting as though something moved beneath. Her eyes, once bright and familiar, were now dark and sunken. The whites stained a sickly yellow. Her cracked lips pulled back into a smile, revealing teeth that were too sharp, too long. "I didn't want you to see me like this," she whispered. The sound of tearing flesh filled the room as her body twisted and contorted. Her arms lengthened, the bones snapping audibly as they stretched. Her fingers lengthened into twisted claws that scraped against the concrete floor. Her spine contorted, bending her body into a distorted, almost insect-like stance. "Lila," I whispered, backing into the wall. She let out a sound, half scream, half growl, that reverberated through the basement. Her head jerked sideways, her neck elongating until it resembled something serpentine. Patches of human skin sloughed off, revealing a glistening, inhuman darkness beneath. "You can still fix this," she said, her voice layered with that eerie, whispered chorus. "Finish the ritual, Jack. Save me. Save us." I couldn't move, couldn't speak. My mind raced, trying to reconcile the creature in front of me with the girl I had once known, the girl I had trusted, the girl I had loved. Her clawed hand shot out, grabbing the doll and holding it toward me. "Do it!" she screamed, her voice slicing through the air. "You promised. You said we'd always be together." "What do you mean, do it?" I shouted, my voice cracking. "What exactly am I supposed to do?" Her eyes locked onto mine with a ferocity that twisted my gut. "Take it," she demanded, her voice trembling. "You have to finish it. Hold the doll. Say the words we said before." "What words?" I gasped, still too terrified to touch it. "What happens if I do this?" She stepped closer, her face twitching, eyes frantic. "You'll be with me, Jack. You'll be safe. We'll be safe. We'll be together, always." She grabbed my hand, her touch cold and unyielding, pulling me toward the doll. "We'll never have to be apart. I'll never have to lose myself." I pulled away, my breath shallow. "What does that mean? Lose yourself? What happens if I do this?" Her voice cracked, her face twisting with pain. "You'll stay with me. Always. Your soul will be tied to mine, Jack. You'll never be alone again. But you won't be the same. You'll share everything with me. Your thoughts, your feelings. We'll be one. But you won't have your freedom anymore. You'll be mine, and I'll be yours." I looked at the doll in her shaking hands, its seams pulling apart as though it were waiting for me to decide. "And if I don't do it?" I whispered, fear making my voice tremble. Her face drained of color, and she froze for a moment, before a primal fear flashed across her features. "If you don't, I won't be me anymore," she whispered. "I won't be able to stop it. I'll become something else, something worse. I won't be able to control it. I'll lose myself completely, and then you'll have to face what's left of me. But I won't stop. Not for you. Not for anyone." She reached for me again, her claws shaking as she offered the doll, her eyes pleading. "Please, Jack. Don't make me do this alone. I can't fight it anymore. If you don't finish this, I'll become something you won't recognize. You won't be able to save me." I shook my head, panic flooding my chest. I don't want to do this. I don't want to be bound to you like that." Her voice cracked as she whispered, "You won't lose yourself completely. You'll be with me. You'll always be safe. But I can't lose you, Jack. I can't." The doll shook in her hands, the air around us thickening with something dark and suffocating. "Please," she gasped, her voice barely a whisper. "I'm begging you. Don't let me become nothing." The doll twitched violently in her grasp, its seams splitting as something dark and viscous oozed out. The rancid smell, sharp and metallic, hit me like a wave. I pressed against the wall, my chest heaving. "Lila, stop this," I shouted. "This isn't you." Her head snapped toward me, her eyes narrowing. "This is me," she said, her voice bitter. "This is what I've always been. You just didn't want to see it." The room tilted, the air thickening as shadows began to writhe and stretch, creeping toward me like living things. "Do it," she said again, her voice softer, almost pleading. "Please, Jack, don't leave me like this." I stared at her, a pressure building in my chest as my ears buzzed. The thing in front of me wasn't human anymore, but her voice, the way she said my name, still sounded like her. And that made it worse. The words echoed in my mind. "Don't leave me like this." I looked at her, or what was left of her, frozen between the urge to run and the crushing guilt anchoring me in place. She crouched in the middle of the room, clutching the doll in her claws. Her body was an unnatural mass of sinew and bone, twisting as though it couldn't decide on a shape. Her dark, sunken eyes locked onto mine, filled with desperation. "Jack," she whispered, her voice layered with that unearthly chorus. "Please, we can fix this. Just take the doll, finish what we started." The doll twitched again, its patchwork seams splitting further to reveal something wet and pulsing inside. It seemed alive, but wrong, like it shouldn't exist. "I can't," I said. "I don't even know what this is, Lila. I don't understand any of it." She dragged herself closer, her claws scraping against the floor. Her movements were jerky and uneven. "You don't need to understand," she said, her voice shaking with emotion. "You just have to trust me, like you used to." The words hit me like a blow. She wasn't just asking me to finish the ritual. She was asking me to believe in her, to see her as the Lila I remembered. But how could I? How could I reconcile this creature with the girl I'd known? "Why did you do this?" I asked, my voice cracking. "Why did you tie me to this?" She looked down at the doll, her claws quivering as they traced along its seams. "Because I couldn't lose you," she said, her voice soft, almost childlike. "Everyone else left. My parents, my friends, they all went away. But you were always there. You promised me you'd stay. You said we'd always be together." Her words sent a wave of guilt crashing over me. I remembered those days, her dragging me out of my house when my parents fought, her holding my hand when I was too scared to go home. She had been my anchor back then, the one constant in a world that felt like it was falling apart. "I didn't know what I was promising," I said, my voice breaking. "But you promised," she said, trembling. "You promised, Jack, and I believed you. I believed you so much that I made sure we'd never have to be apart." She held out the doll, her claws shaking. "This is all that's left of us. If you finish the ritual, we can go back to how it was. We can be happy again." My fists clenched at my sides. "Lila, I can't. This isn't right. This isn't what we were supposed to be." Her expression twisted, caught between anger and despair. "Don't say that," she hissed, her voice deepening. "Don't you dare say that. After everything I've done for you, After everything I've sacrificed? Her voice cracked, and for a moment, she looked almost human again. Please, Jack, she whispered, tears streaming down her disfigured face. Please don't leave me. I felt my resolve crumbling. The desperation in her voice, it was too much. But as I looked at her, at the monstrous form she had become, I knew there was no going back. Even if I finished the ritual, even if I did everything she asked, we could never be what we were. I'm sorry, I said, barely audible. Her body convulsed violently, and she let out a scream that shook the walls. The doll fell from her claws, landing with a wet thud. She lunged for it, but something stopped her. She crumpled to the floor, shaking as broken, uneven sobs seeped from her throat. Her sobs echoed through the basement, raw and unrelenting. The black tar pooling from the doll crept outward, its tendrils curling like veins across the floor. It reached her claws first, wrapping around them as though it recognized her. She didn't flinch. She cradled her head in her hands, rocking back and forth. You don't understand, she whispered, heartbreak and malice intertwined in her voice. You never understood. I did this for us. For you. Lila, I started, guilt tightening my throat. No. She raised her head sharply, her eyes burning with fury. You don't get to say my name like that. Not after what you've done. The tar seeped into her flesh, her claws digging into the concrete as her body convulsed again. I wanted to move, to pull her free, but I couldn't. Fear rooted me in place, or maybe it was the crushing weight of knowing I couldn't save her. You could have fixed this, she growled, dragging herself toward me. You could have made it right, but you chose to leave me like this. I didn't. My voice cracked. I didn't mean for any of this to happen. She laughed bitterly, and the sound hollow and chilling. You didn't mean to. That's your excuse for everything, isn't it? But I didn't forget, Jack. I never forgot, and now... Her voice broke, and for a moment I saw her again. The Lila I remembered. She reached out, her claw hesitating midair. Please, she said softly. Please don't leave me. Don't let me disappear. Tears burned my eyes as I looked at her. The girl who had once been my best friend. My only constant in a chaotic childhood. I wanted to reach out, to pull her back, but the thing in front of me wasn't her anymore. The tar climbed higher, swallowing her legs, her torso, her shoulders. Her body convulsed, and she let out a scream that tore through the basement. You promised me, she wailed. You promised! The tar surged upward, enveloping her head and arms. She let out one final scream, a sound of pure anguish that seemed to rip through my chest before the blackness consumed her entirely. The room fell silent. I stared at the spot where she had been, my chest heaving, my mind unable to process what had just happened. The doll was gone. The tar was gone. The basement felt impossibly empty, as though the very air had been sucked out. For a moment I could have sworn I heard her voice, soft and far away, calling my name. But when I turned, no one was there. I stumbled up the stairs, my legs weak, and stepped outside. The cold night air hit me like a slap, cutting through the haze in my mind. The house loomed behind me, dark and silent, its windows like hollow eyes watching me leave. I climbed into my car and sat there for a long time, staring at the house. The weight of it all pressed down on me, suffocating. I should have felt relief, but all I felt was grief. As I started the engine, I glanced in the rearview mirror. For a split second, I thought I saw her standing in the doorway, her human form intact, her wide eyes filled with longing and despair. But when I blinked, the doorway was empty. I drove away, her final words playing over and over in my mind. I didn't want to be alone. And Then as the house disappeared behind me, a horrifying realization crept over me. She wasn't gone. She was still with me. Not in the house, not in the tower, but somewhere deeper, somewhere I couldn't escape. And I knew, no matter how far I ran, she would never leave me.